Hey everyone, I'm really excited to show you this camera today. I've been privileged to own this Contax for a while now. It's turning to be one of my favorite cameras right off the bat here, so I've been shooting with it for a little bit. As a matter of fact, I paid a little bit of money to Mr. Mark Hansen of the Classic Camera Repair to do a CLA on this body, so it's working wonderfully, and I actually obtained a 50mm f1.8 sonar lens for it. I also have this Biogon lens that's excellent as well. That's a 35mm that came with the camera when I originally bought it. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking to you about this camera and why I like it and some of the idiosyncrasies of using it. So hopefully you get a little bit of an idea what it is, and then at the end of the video I will follow it up with some photographs that I've taken both with the 35mm and with the 50mm lens. So just to keep the history of the camera short, Contax was made in Germany, and it was a brand owned by a company called Zeiss-Opton, which is pretty famous to most of us. Zeiss lenses have great reputation to this day, and so basically Zeiss was German company that operated prior to World War II, mainly out of, I believe, Dresden, Germany, where the Contax cameras were made. And first there was a Contax 1, and then after that there was a Contax 2 that also became basically a copy of a lot of other cameras, such as, I believe, the Kiev and Nikon S rangefinders and some of the other ones. And then after World War II, when Germany was divided into East and West Germany, there became basically two Zeiss-Opton manufacturing sites, one in East and one in West Germany. And then the one in West Germany that I'm going to focus on here was the plant was moved into Stuttgart, and these bodies were made in Stuttgart. And then there was another city in Germany, I don't remember the name of them, made the Zeiss Opton lenses. There was also the West German version. There was also a Zeiss Jena lens line, which was from East Germany, and I'm told that the optics on them are just about as good, but sometimes the build quality seems to be a little less. I have no idea. I don't own one of those, so I can't really comment other than what I've read online. Okay, so what I really want to do is just kind of give you some general idea without getting into a lot of detail why I love this camera. And I've shot Leicas, I've shot Nikons, I've shot Olympus cameras, Minoltas, all kinds of things, Hasselblad, Rolleiflex. I've had many different ones, and usually I either kind of immediately link up and hook up with the camera and it means something to me and I want to use it, or I kind of struggle using it. And those that I struggle using with, I usually move on to somebody else. This one, for whatever reason, just feels right in so many ways that I just want to go photograph with it. And I think to me that's the most important thing of all of it, because you gotta want to take the pictures. To me, it's very small. It's very well balanced in the hand. I like the fact that I have my thumbs on each side. It seems like I'm holding the camera very solidly, and that's all I need to do to take good pictures. One of the strange things about this camera is it doesn't have a film advance like you would usually see with that lever that you pull. It actually is a knob, a knurled knob, which actually looks pretty awesome, but nonetheless would perhaps be a little harder to use. But in practice, I don't really find it that hard. If you read the manual for the camera, you're actually going to find out that they don't suggest that you just hold the camera like this and move this knob with one finger like that. I would totally agree with that, because one of the things I found is when you do it the way I just did it now, that it doesn't always actually even space the film correctly because you're going so slow. So what you actually want to do is you kind of hold the camera in one hand like this, and you grab a hold of the knob with the other one, and you just do it in one fell swoop like that. That's very quick. It works just fine, and honestly, it's not even that long to get to the next frame. So yeah, that's one of the oddities, but works fine for me. I don't care. The rangefinder is decent. It's very accurate. However, it's not so big as you would find in a Leica M3 or something like that, but it doesn't bother me. I actually wear glasses even, and works fine for me there also. I do actually kind of like this little focus ring on the right side here that I'll talk about a little bit later, even though it is also a controversial piece of this, but you can focus the lens just by holding onto it, moving it like I just did there as well, so you don't even have to use this if you don't like it. It has that kind of a typical Leica slash Contax way of removing the back that kind of just pulls out and falls out. and this little spool falls out, which is not a great design, so that's another thing that people hate about it. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So yeah, but all things considered, I find the loading and unloading to be easy enough. I find shooting with it to be a joy. I find the sound of it not to be too difficult to hear, and the pictures are just amazing. Probably some of the best contrast and quality I've gotten out of any glass that I've ever used. All right, so generalizations out of the way. Let's kind of start a little bit at the upper left here on the top of the camera and talk through some of the controls. So over here on the left side, basically you have the film rewind, and basically what would happen is when you are done shooting, you would press this button here to release the mechanism that holds the film in place, and then you would just with your fingers here rewind the film. That process, that takes a little bit. It's not that bad, but you can kind of start getting a little bit of cramps in your hands as you do it. This particular body of mine, based on the research that Mr. Mark Hansen has done, is been produced in between July of 1950 and August of 1951, and it's actually a very beautiful copy of it, I would say. One of the oddities about old Zeiss cameras is that they have these so-called Zeiss bumps on the back, which is basically a chemical reaction that happens in between the adhesive on the leatherette or the leather and the brass screws on the back. So it can be repaired, but reading online, it's not that easy, and if it doesn't really bug you that much, I'd probably say just leave it alone. The top plate is actually rhodium plated, it's not chrome, and this is actually a rare metal like platinum, so it's a beautiful thing to behold. It looks very pretty, and it kind of makes it look like a little piece of jewelry, I suppose, in some ways. Alright, so then here you have a cold shoe mount. I don't ever plan to use flash with this because this PC socket, or especially on the, it's not really a PC socket, flash connection socket, is a complicated one, and it has a little addition that you have to buy, a special size part that then makes it so it can connect to the flash. So I'm not even going to try to explain that. You can research it yourself, but I would say using this camera without flash is probably easier. There's other cameras maybe you would want to use for that. One thing I do use this cold shoe for is to slide my meter in there. I have a Sekonic small meter that fits on top that works great. There's also one made by Voigtlander that a lot of people use that's very small, and it would fit on here also. Over here, so now I've moved to the right side, things get a little bit more interesting. You actually have a shutter speed dial. Shutter speeds on this camera go from 1 second to 1/1250th of a second. And there was almost a little bit of a marketing against the Leica because the Leica went to 1,000, so they made this one go just a little bit longer. You can adjust the shutter speed before or after you cock the shutter. And in a camera that works as it should, all these speeds should work for you, and you should hear the difference in the length of timing that they produce. Moving forward on this knob just a little bit, and you can kind of see how it works just by me moving it, so I think that explains it well enough. You have here on top a film counter. I didn't think I'd like this, but it actually works pretty good. So what you do is you put the film in, and once the film is in, and you advance it a couple of times so it's ready to go, you just kind of move this knob over to where it's on 0, and then the counter starts from there, and it's very accurate and it works, and I don't have any problems with it, at least on mine. So basically that's how that bit works. Now let's go to the front here. Over here on the left you have the delayed shutter, so if you pull that down and press the shutter, then it's going to kind of buzz back to its original position and take a picture. I won't try to do it now. Over here, what you will see is a rangefinder window and the viewfinder of the rangefinder. So these two things are basically what makes this camera different than the SLRs. In the SLR, you have a prism on top that actually kind of conveys the image from the lens through the prism to your eye. Here, you're basically looking straight at the image, and then over that is like a little patch that basically there's two patches, and you have to align the images on the two patches so they kind of overlap, and once they overlap you are in focus. So this little window and is through optics basically used to give you that ability, and if you cover this up with your finger while you're taking the picture, you will actually lose that patch, so you kind of have to make sure you don't do that. The viewfinder is not the brightest viewfinder the world's ever seen. The Leica is bigger, Leica M3, which actually came a little bit after this camera, but I find it good enough and I don't really have any issues with it in use. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about this lens mount. One of the most bizarre lens mounts I've ever seen, but it works pretty good. Basically, this lens mount has the inner and the outer lens mount. So the inner mount is used with a lens like this 50mm f1.5 sonar, and the way you mount and dismount a lens, and hopefully I can do this right because I don't do it that much, is you basically move the helicoid until it's locked in the infinity lock position, and then there's a little kind of a metal release here that you press down, and then you move the lens clockwise, and it's about quarter turn or so, and that will make the lens come out. So the lens is very tiny, and it's not very heavy because it's kind of missing what you would traditionally see in the bottom part here, and that's actually a good thing in this case because I think it makes the whole camera a little lighter to carry around. And so now you can see the focusing helicoid. And if you release it from its infinity lock, then by spinning this little wheel up here, you're actually rotating this entire section, which then would allow you to focus the camera. Alright, so now it just so happens that I have another kind of lens here with me. This is a 35mm f2.8 Biogon. This is also a kind of a legendary lens in some ways. It also produces amazing pictures, and one interesting thing is that it makes everything wider, but it doesn't make it look like it's a wide kind of shot. It still looks like all the lines are straight. So you take the red lines on this lens and red dots over here, and you align it all. You press down and you rotate counterclockwise until it locks in, and now you can start using this lens. And you basically, at least for me, you focus with just turning this focus ring on this lens. Trying to move this ring here, at least on my camera, is very difficult. And for this lens, the aperture is also adjusted by spinning this black ring here. Alright, so moving on to the bottom, what you're going to see here is basically two releases that you would pull up like that, and then rotate one clockwise, one counterclockwise as you're looking at it like I am. This kind of releases the back, and then you just slip the back. One thing that everybody I think hates about this is in a Leica, this particular spool is going to kind of stay on, whereas here it falls right out like that. So you have to be careful when you open the camera that you actually open it at either horizontal position or like this, so it doesn't come out. But basically all you have to do is you put your film cassette here, you feed the film across these little wheels and the sprockets, and then there's a little kind of a, I don't know what I would call it, like a tongue here that you can slip the film under. And then once you do that, you can actually start advancing or shoot a couple of frames with it, and get the shutter to advance again. And then once you feel like your film is on like it should be, you can close the whole thing. One thing I always suggest is you kind of tighten this so that it's kind of not allowing you to move it anymore, because then you know that the film is kind of, there isn't any freedom in the spool. And then when you're advancing the film to take a picture, you look here, and if this is moving also, then you know that basically your film is moving forward, and you will end up with pictures and everything is as it should be. I'm not a huge expert in the shutter, but this shutter is different because it's actually like these metal curtains that move up and down when you take a picture rather than left and right, and there's some cords and things inside there that make all that possible. Sometimes they have to be replaced. I was told mine was in really good condition, so there was no need to do that. Honestly, these things last for a long time, and I think it's nothing really to worry about. I think that this camera is, with some care or maybe a CLA, will even now last somebody another 50 years. All right, when you're done with that, you just basically slip this back in. You twist these opposite of what you did when you open them up, and then I guess if we were to magically take a picture now, which we won't because there's no film in it, we would have to put this back in, and there you go. Mine's come with an instruction manual, which is really cool to have. It actually even has a stamp of the place in Frankfurt where it was bought from, Max Neithold, I think that's how it's pronounced. Gentleman that bought the camera also had this photo data book that came with it, so it kind of has his name and some information up in the upper right, so that's kind of cool as well. One other thing that I wanted to show you is the filters that you might be able to find that go with this camera. This particular one is a green filter. The filter that goes on both of these lenses is a 40.5 millimeter filter. You can still buy those on eBay and some other places. They're not your generic size, but they are available. So just keep in mind, if you do have a filter on the camera, you actually have to adjust exposures accordingly. So for instance, I usually use a red filter that might need up to a 3 stops adjustment. So you have to overexpose by 3 stops to compensate for the filter. Yeah, so I think that's about it. If you have any questions, please just ask below on the video and I will try to answer them. I'm sure I missed some important things, but nonetheless, I think it should kind of give you an idea about this amazing camera that I think it's totally worth checking out. They're not as popular on eBay as some of the other similar cameras, so I think the prices you can get these for aren't really that bad, so I think it's worth a shot. Alright, thank you for watching and happy shooting.